You're listening to Conflict Radio on the Conflict Radio Network. Greetings and welcome to Conflict Radio. Today is July 6, 2020. I hope everybody had a great 4th of July weekend that's in the United States. If you're not in the United States, I hope you had a great weekend. Today, our guest is Cynthia Sue Larson. She is a best-selling author of several books, including Quantum Jumps, Reality Shifts, and High Energy Money. She helps people live more miraculous lives by accessing worlds of possibility. Cynthia has a degree in physics from UC Berkeley, an MBA degree, a Doctor of Divinity, and a second-degree black belt. Cynthia is the founder of Reality Shifters and is president of the International Mandela Effect Conference. Cynthia hosts Living the Quantum Dream on the Dream Visions 7 radio network and has been featured in numerous shows including Gaia, the History Channel, Coast to Coast AM, and BBC. Cynthia reminds us to ask in every situation, how good can it get? And you can subscribe to her free monthly e-zine at realityshifters.com. You can also search Cynthia Sue Larson on YouTube and get her YouTube channel. I recommend going over there and subscribing. We're probably going to have a really good conversation because I have a lot of questions to ask her about the Mandela Effect and quantum jumping. It's a new term to me, quantum jumping. I'd actually not heard of this until recently. And we're going to talk to her about some experiences that I have had personally with that. So we're going to bring her on in just a second. Just want to remind you that you can find us, Conflict Radio, on all the major podcatchers, Apple iTunes, YouTube, the Conflict Radio Network. Be sure to subscribe to us over there if you haven't already. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and get right to it. We'll be right back right after this. Well, welcome back to Conflict Radio. We're with Cynthia Sue Larson. Cynthia, how are you doing today?
Awesome. So glad to be with you today, Conflict.
We are very excited to have you on. I've got some real personal and interesting questions for you that I think the audience is going to love. But I want to get right into what your specialty is. It's the Mandela Effect, right?
That's right. Although when I got interested in this topic in the late 1990s, it didn't have that name just yet.
What was it called? What was it called then?
It didn't have a name that I could find at all, actually. I was witnessing just really strange, obvious changes to history and reality. At least that was the appearance of the phenomenon. And I thought, this is in the early days of the internet. I was actually hooked up to a computer that was connected to the system at UC Berkeley. So it was part of the ARPANET in the early days. And people have no idea what that was like unless they were there. It was weird. So like trying to surf the net was nothing like it is now. I mean, not at all. But I did the best I could to see with the research available at UC Berkeley and everything that was available. Is there anything to describe what I'm witnessing, where things are changing, they're appearing, disappearing, transforming, and changes in time, all that stuff. And so I just thought, well, these are like reality shifts. That's what I would call it. So I started a website first with the third age community, and I just called it Reality Shifters. And then once I started doing radio interviews in the late 1990s, one of the broadcast people suggested that I really needed to get something like some name for this and a website. So I just called it Reality Shifters because to me it was obvious that we're all, even if people don't think they're experiencing this, I believe we actually are all experiencing this. And what it looks and feels a lot like is that reality is shifting. But personally, I think there's something else going on bigger than that.
So what exactly is the Mandela Effect, and why are people so fascinated by it?
That's a great question. It's come into people's awareness recently, thanks to the media, TV, newspaper articles, and a lot of people have seen stories about the Berenstain Bears, for example, with it's a commonly known name for a children's book series, and it's so multi-generational that people that grew up with those books are now parents themselves, and they're reading these books to their children. And a lot of people remember that the books used to be spelled differently, that they were Berenstein or Berenstein, but now there's no confusion at all because it's not either of those spellings with EIN. It's just Berenstain. So the Mandela Effect, that's one example. There are lots of examples of things that just seem like they've always been a certain way, but it's not what we remember. And collectively, people are remembering that there's just something really different, whether it's the logo of, like Volkswagen now has a little line separating between the V and the W that you'll see on the corporate identity on the vehicle. So it's on all the logos, and it's not a change in the logo. That little line has always been there, but many people, like even I don't remember that line was always there. It used to be the V and the W would all just be one big set of lines, like the V and the W, just like sort of like X's, like there's a big X in the middle. That's what it used to look like, and now it's not like that. So it's the Mandela Effect. I'm giving examples because that's usually the way people bumble into this subject. They just feel like, well, wait a minute, something's different. It might come up by a friend asking if they've experienced it. Pretty much everybody under the age of 25 has definitely experienced this or knows what it is. They've recognized that characters like Pikachu, who was just that little cartoon character, and he was, the guy to catch 'em all. That guy, he used to, yeah, it's a Pokemon, but he used to have black on his tail, or people remember that, and now he looks different. So it's just all kinds of things. Pretty much anything at all is susceptible to having always been some way very different than what we remember, and that is the Mandela Effect.
Now, what do you think is actually going on? Why are we experiencing these changes?
Well, that's a big subject, and I just do my best to take a shot at what's happening and why we're experiencing it. But that's a long-winded way to say that I can't say for sure, because I can't tell you that we absolutely know for sure what's going on. But what seems to make sense to me, because I do have an undergraduate degree in physics from UC Berkeley, and so when I see these changes, I can't help but notice that pretty much everything we're witnessing is what you might call a macroscopic or large-scale example of what we know is happening on the quantum scale. So you could call it the Mandela Effect, you could call it the quantum effect also, and just say, well, is it possible that we might literally see a different reality? Because in quantum physics, we know for sure that history, quantum physics forbids a single history. That's what Stephen Hawking pointed out, and he's right. In quantum physics, there are multiple possible histories, and they're all equally possibly true. We also know that the future changes the present and changes the past. That's part of quantum physics. So we would expect to see the kind of phenomenon that we are seeing, but only if it's possible that these phenomena could happen on this large scale. And we wouldn't see it all the time, but we would expect to see it sometimes. And that is what we're seeing. So to me, it's a good fit, but it doesn't explain why certain things would change in particular, or why some people feel like they see them and others don't. Or as far as why does it seem like it's happening much more now, that I would say is possibly just the benefits that we're getting of our improved relationship with technology, like the internet, being able to connect with people around the world. So lots of people could share their experience that they remember. For example, Santa Claus had a workshop at the North Pole. There really was a continent of Arctica. There was a North Pole. There was snow there. It was a continent. People would remember that. Now there's, and so you can find other people that say, yeah, I remember that. Now, of course, there's just ocean and water up there at the North Pole. No place for Santa's workshop, really. If there was, I mean, it's fictitious, but It's kind of weird. So things like that. On the internet now, you can find other people to say, that's weird. I remember that too. Whereas if you were to ask just before the internet and you just mentioned to random friends and family, chances are most people would look at you like you're nuts. Let's look up what it is. And then they would just tell you things are what they are. Like, okay, you remember Thanksgiving is the third Thursday in November. That's what I remember. And now apparently it never has been, or maybe it briefly was. But I remember growing up in the 60s and 70s and 80s, Thanksgiving was always the third Thursday. A lot of people do remember that. And the reason we're able to talk about it and the Mandela Effect is gaining steam and interest is precisely because of social media like Facebook, Reddit, YouTube, and the internet, that people can start sharing these experiences.
Now, a lot of this, I guess, if I have listeners that used to listen to the old Art Bell show, would know you got to talk to Art Bell, and
Yes.
it was a great show. I remember listening to it. In fact, I just listened to it again the other day. Basically, where I'm going with this is that he announced on air in the 80s that Mandela had died when in fact he wasn't, and it sent pretty much the internet in, or I guess it wasn't the internet, but it sent everybody into a frenzy because he wasn't dead.
Right.
So that's, I guess, that would be a pretty good example of what's going on. Now, if it's multi-dimensional, how many different dimensions do you think that there could be? Is it infinite?
Well, when you go to physics, then it looks like we need at least 10 for a minimum of 10 for physics as we know it to um, tie neatly bundle up into a beautiful theory of everything package, so that we've got unity between quantum physics and relativistic physics of the huge, the large astronomical scale physics. So at least 10 dimensions seem like they're required. And that's there's a lot of esoteric different traditions that will talk about different levels of dimensional consciousness, of dimensional reality. So I don't know exactly what that number is. I don't think anybody knows exactly, but there are some interesting systems that go through different numbers of dimensions. And in my book, Reality Shifts, when consciousness changes the physical world, I describe 10 different dimensions and what it would feel like to experience consciousness at those 10 levels. And it's very similar to what the consciousness author and expert Ken Wilber has also described in his books, like A Brief History of Everything. So it's very, very similar kind of an outlook with just going through just 10 simple levels. But I think it's quite possible there are many more than 10. I think that's just a good starting point, so we can kind of get our human consciousness aware that we're playing with a universe that's much more multidimensional than people realize. And for people that don't know what we're talking about, one way to think about the dimensions is to look at what the configuration of a one-dimensional world would look like compared to a two-dimensional or a three-dimensional. So one dimension would just be like a point that has no measurements at all. It's just like a little point. It's just like when you learn geometry in school and you might touch your pen or pencil to the paper and make a dot. That's the point that we're talking about. So it's just very simple. When you go to two dimensions, you can create something that's got a line. So then it's like a ray of light. It's like a photon. And so, in fact, that's what these are like to me. I think a point is like a photon, sort of, and when it's just a dot. And then the line would be the path that an object might take in a straight line. When that's one dimension is just going in one line. So it's, but then when you get to, so I should start over again. I think I incorrectly identified the point. The point would be like 0 dimensions. The line is 1 dimension. When you go to the plane, that's 2 dimensions. It's like an X, Y axis. So you can kind of tell what you've got by, we're familiar with X, Y, Z axes for 3-dimensional space. And we know what you like. If you mail a package, you measure its width, its height, and its length. Or if you're fitting some furniture in your space, you need to know those three measurements. That's what we're talking about. But in flatland, that would be just the x and the y axis. That's like a flat piece of paper. And so the dimensional awareness is really interesting because it shows that we are three-dimensional beings. So it's easy for us to look at this imaginary flatland where we can imagine people are living on a flat piece of paper. We can use a piece of paper and imagine like that's their entire world. It's very flat. And for them, it could seem mysterious if a three-dimensional object were to go through their little flat world. Anything would look strange, like whether it's a Coca-Cola bottle or a rose or pencil or what have you. Anything that moves through could start mysteriously changing shapes on that piece of paper. So as a Coca-Cola bottle goes through, it would either look like a circle or an oval, depending on the angle that it's tilted at when it's going through that plane. But as you move it through that flatland plane, the residents of flatland would notice, like, whoa, it came out of nowhere. Suddenly we either have this circle or this oval. And now look, it's changing shapes. It's getting much bigger. Now it's getting smaller. Now it's getting bigger. And then it vanishes as the Coca-Cola bottle goes through the page, the flatland plane of existence. So it's good to look at that because then we can start recognizing what would it look like if higher dimensional objects and events are interacting with us in our three-dimensional XYZ plane of experience. We also have time, so technically, because we move through an experience of time, you can consider that a fourth dimension. And that's why we have the phrase space-time, which is also worthy of acknowledging.
Well, that's different. That's different than our own time, because time itself is a human construct, isn't it?
Well, time is interesting in itself. You're right, because there is no such thing as objective time. It's very dependent on location and subjective experience. And that's one thing that we found out with relativity is that there really is a difference in the way someone would experience time based on their location, and there's a gravitational effect as well. So when we're on like at the sea level on Earth, you're going to have a different experience of time going slower. It's going to go more slowly. You'll have things are just moving slower than if you're up high on top of Mount Everest, where there's a noticeable difference in time at that elevation. And then if you go up higher and leave the surface of the Earth entirely, you start breaking free of this gravitational well that kind of makes space-time kind of heavy and slow right around anything large like the sun or the earth.
Well, I have a feeling that there's many more than 10 different ones, and let me tell you a story. And this is the reason why I actually got you on the show, because I really wanted to talk about this. In fact, it's the reason why I created my entire podcast to begin with, and I'll explain to you what happened really quick. I went to bed one night and I thought I was in a dream, but it wasn't. I'm telling you, I don't think this was a dream, and I'll tell you what happened. I got stuck in in betweens, I was in between dimensions, and I was going to dimension after dimension after dimension, trying to find the correct one that I was in, and every time I'd go to one, I'd either run into myself or I'd run into somebody that I knew that I knew it wasn't right. And there were a few where I ran into myself and I was a real jerk. I was like, wow, I'm really a jerk here. I got to get out of here. And then I would go back to what was the in between. And it seemed like I was doing this forever. And I couldn't figure out how to get back to this dimension, the one that where everything was right, that I knew was right. And somebody had come up to me and said, "Look, you're quantum jumping. This is how you get back. And when you get back, come find me. I'm a researcher at Cornell, and talk to me and we'll talk about your experience." And I got back and I woke, and I'd be honest with you, I'd never heard of quantum jumping before. I had no idea what it was, and I woke up and I'm like, quantum jumping, this is what happened, and I wrote down everything that had happened, and then I started researching it, and I never before had put quantum jumping into the same category as the Mandela Effect until I ran across your book, Quantum Jumping,
Yes.
and then I started looking into your book and what the Mandela Effect was. I obviously had heard of that before, and then I said, "Well, that makes perfect sense. That's exactly what I was doing. I was literally, but I was stuck. I couldn't find my way back to this one. It's like I was in an in between. Like, if that does that make any sense to you at all, or do you
Oh,
think I was
yes.
just
Yeah, it
dreaming?"
totally makes sense. And it's amazing because it fits in some of the experiences that people who've had near death experiences have felt like they're in this beautiful in between. Is beautiful because they might have been about to die of, for example, cancer that the doctors can't cure. That would be like Anita Moorjani. She wrote a book, Dying to Be Me, and she describes an in between place. And in her in between, she didn't have quite, I mean, everybody's experience is unique. So it's like you can't always guarantee that someone would have your experience or Anita's experience. But what I think is fascinating is it's that same sensation of like all these possibilities are equally possible. I described it in my fiction book, Karen Kimball and the Dreamweaver's Web, where a young girl goes into like an in between and she can see all these realities. So this is a very powerful experience for a human to have. It's an exceptional human experience,
You
and
know,
it's
it
transformative. So
it's
anyone that goes through an experience where you're in that in between, whatever the reason, whether it's your like a dream like you had, or a near death experience, or whatever that, however they may get there, I would posit, and it seems likely true, that in most cases people would come out of it transformed. Like you can't go back to the way life was before, I would imagine. I don't know, but that's what I would guess.
Yeah, it seemed like I was stuck there forever. Like it had to, like years and years and years. I was trying to figure out how to get back to my right dimension, and finally this guy that was there, he told me. He said this is how you get back to yours, and when you do get back, come find me at Cornell. And I'll tell you, I woke right up, and I come out to the computer, and I searched the crap out of Cornell. I was never been able to find this guy. So if you ever run across anybody at Cornell that's into this, be like, oh, I know somebody who's looking
Right.
for you.
I'll let you know. Yeah. What's so interesting is I've met my future self. But what happens with these experiences is, and I just gave a talk about this very thing at our most recent International Mandela Effect conference. I was talking about the way that possible future selves can interact with our present or past selves, and that I actually have interacted with my future self, I think, on many occasions. But what we often get is it's a different future self than the one we actually end up embodying because we've already changed our own life that way. It's a very interesting interplay dynamic. So what I'm saying, long story short, we may or may not ever find that particular Cornell researcher. He may or may not remember that ever was the case, but that's irrelevant because obviously that actually did happen in a reality, and you really did interact with that Cornell researcher. Even if I don't know if you remember his name, but
No, no, and he never even told me his name. At least not that I remember.
right. And I also know that I've helped people who are stuck in, often I'll be dreaming and I'll just experience someone else in a nightmare loop, like they keep getting killed in like a woman going down into a dark basement where her car is, and the lights come on with motion detection as she goes down the stairs. She uses her remote key to access her car. Just as the door's opening, someone jumps her from behind and strangles her, or something like that. And the dream, it's a dream, and I'm just helping this person like wake up. That's a dream. Wake up, wake up. You can change this. So it's like it's not even my dream, but I'll be helping someone like, hey, you don't have to do this. And sometimes when I wake up, I wonder, was that really a dream, or did I actually really help someone in for real? You got a weird feeling about going down these stairs. Why don't you just not go down these stairs right now? Let's just not do this right now. It's sort of like, you've got a bad feeling. Let's not do it. And I think it brings up another interesting. Well, there's so many interesting aspects to your experience, because what I'm saying is that's real. You know how when you dreamt it, it felt real, right? Like
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
realer than real. Yeah. Because some people listening might not quite I think your audience would grasp that, but anyone coming in off just encountering us for the first time might think we're just talking about some dream. No, when you have a dream like this, number one, you can feel this is realer than real. And when you get that sense, like, wow, this is going on for years, it feels like that's literally true. It's like you're looping. It's like you're just trying everything you can to get out. And I think as humans, in order to evolve, we actually do require a little bit of a crisis like that in order to raise our consciousness to an awareness that we wouldn't have otherwise. So not that it's always necessarily a good thing to go through that kind of trauma. Like, it was a difficult experience that you went through, but I think it was really powerful because you were able to, first of all, recognize this doesn't feel right, and you didn't settle for any of the lesser realities. Did you get a sense at some point that if you had settled, you'd be in a weird reality?
No, there were a few realities that I was actually told, like you need to get out of here. Like I would run into myself, and myself would be like, yeah, you this is mine. You got to go. This is mine. This isn't,
Interesting.
and I ran into myself a few times, and like I said, there were a few where I was a real jerk. I was like, I'm thinking, wow, what a jerk that guy is. Like, he was so mean and nasty.
Right.
you know,
Yeah, I know.
and there were some that everything was wrong. I wasn't in the right place. I wasn't in the right, even in the right timeline sometimes. You know.
Right. And this is the reason I like to call it a quantum effect, or quantum jumps, reality shifts, as well as Mandela effect. These are all connected, as you correctly noticed, because the reality shifts that a lot of people first noticed. I just recently, this last week, found out that there's a term called jot, just one of those things that has been studied by researchers in England and Australia, and it was known as jot or jottles, JOTT, just one of those things. But they were looking at a very tiny little subset of reality shifts that although some of them are spectacular, where things would appear, disappear, transform, and transport. And that was pretty much it. Then they would look at things that just come in out of nowhere, and like a travel alarm clock that was completely different, or a letter would arrive that didn't belong to a person, and it arrived on her lap when she's taking a nap. And these stories would go back to the 1950s. These are what I love about all this is that they have the Society for Psychical Research, SPR, in England, and this author that I'm describing her book Jot, that's Mary Rose Barrington, and now she's passed on, but there's a living researcher in Sydney, Australia, named Tony Jinks, and he wrote a book, Disappearing Object Phenomenon, the same subset of tedious, very kind of boring personal Mandela effects. But it's very important because these are very bona fide. He's a psychologist. He's a professor at the Western University in Australia, there in Sydney. And what's extraordinary and meaningful is he's finding that people that experience these things absolutely have no difference psychologically than those who say they do not. And this is very profound. It means that experiencers are not spacing out, hallucinating, confabulating, just doing, having confirmation bias, all these things that a lot of psychologists and mainstream media currently is tending to put down Mandela effect experiencers and say, like, well, obviously you're confused, or that was just a dream, or whatever. But I'm bringing up this research because I'm really happy to see it right now, especially here we are in 2020. I think we're hitting a tipping point where more people are experiencing this Mandela effect. So people listening to your experience for the first time, I think, in human history, outside of perhaps shamanic times where people would believe dreams, people can actually listen to what you're saying and think, wow, I think this really did happen to conflict. And this is mind blowing. It's like they're going to believe you. And I'm so glad. I believe you. To me, this really sounds exactly like the kind of experiences that I and thousands of others have had that have been writing to me for over 20 years. So I have the benefit of being the hub of the central, recipient of all these firsthand reports. And I've noticed over the last 20 plus years that, people are starting to come into a comfort zone with this topic, even though it's a mind-blowing topic,
Yeah.
really mind-blowing.
So let's just say, for instance, that I was doing that, and I think I was, but for all the doubters and everybody, let's just say that I was, just for the sake of what the Mandela Effect is. That would perfectly explain what the Mandela Effect is. Like, let's just say, for instance, I did come back to this one, and I got it so close, except for the Bernstein Bears. So let's just use that as an example. I got it. It was so close. The only things off is that. Now I was able to do that as one person. The Mandela Effect is more like it's a lot of people. So how would a lot of people be able to do that at one time?
Right. This gets into the fact that we're social animals, and it gets into the idea of what is me, what am I, and we assume that we know. The truth is not so not as simple as we might have thought it was. You're not just your body is number one. You're so much more. A lot of people don't realize that we have this sort of an infinite nature to ourselves. That sometimes people actually do remember a moment when they are sure they should or would have died, and the next thing they knew, their big Mandela effect, their personal Mandela effect, reality shift, quantum jump, whatever, is that they're suddenly completely clear of whatever that cause of death would have been in that moment. Either they've teleported through it, or they've quantum tunneled through it. Again, to me, I see these quantum phenomena. It's like, wow. Or they've just jumped to another reality that's adjacent. So what was happening is not happening anymore. So it's kind of like a completely different, it's like a scene splice. Like someone took a movie editing toolkit and just spliced right there, like scene change. So it's and the reason for this that I would say is definitely associated with it. We don't know exactly how the cause, what the cause is exactly, and that's precisely because we don't know who we are. This is really absolutely the core of the issue. When I say I, what do I mean by I? I know that I'm bigger than my body. I also know that I've got, I think with my brain circuitry, the neurons in my brain, but I also have neurons in my heart. Now we're finding that our gut, our stomach, is actually a brain as well. And this really does correlate nicely with the way that a lot of mystery school teachers, shamans of old, Tibetan Buddhist masters, and so forth have known for centuries, actually thousands of years, that we have consciousness distributed throughout our bodies, but also beyond our bodies. So that means if you're dreaming, for example, you can have a true dream. You can do what shamans do and work with energy in that astral dream realm and make changes there that have physical effects when you wake up again or come out of that trance. So this idea that collectively we're experiencing Mandela effects, but the truth is no two people usually ever agree on all of the Mandela effects. Like some people might agree with the Bernstein Bears one, like, okay, that changed. But then they might say, I personally am not aware of a change in the color of the stoplights. Like some people say it used to be green, yellow, red in the United States on the top, green first, and they remember it was that way. Other people don't. I actually did remember a time when I was confused and that switched, and I was like, when did that happen? But it was before I was really tracking reality shifts and the Mandela effect. I just thought, what the heck? Did they just change all the lights? And then I just kind of what they call took the download. That's a phrase that some of the Mandela Effect community use to indicate you kind of know what it's supposed to be. You know what everyone thinks it's always been, even though you remember it differently. So it's fascinating because this idea of what about the collective,
I
what about the
lost you there
individual?
for a little. You're kind of away from the mic, or
Okay,
there we go.
sorry.
You're back. I
Okay,
got you.
yeah. So thank you. Yeah, the collective is the part of all of our consciousness working together. So then it's a we. There's like a sense of cosmic connectedness. We have a shared awareness and we have a shared creative quality. Just as those of us who believe in God or a creator, those people would say, like, yes, if you look at the ultimate collective, that would be God. And physicists often need to get into that topic as well when they look at the observer with quantum mechanics, because quantum mechanics seems to absolutely require observation when we look at the wave function collapse and so forth. So the observer plays a pivotal role. And we're noticing with the Mandela effect that communities of people might be establishing sort of a collective consensus reality, which we more or less agree on. But each of us, we can have subgroups of smaller groups of people and then individuals that absolutely have very unique experiences that are quite different than that collective. And this is normal. I think it's the way nature works. I think it's very big. It looks to me like every place, if we take that idea and apply it to, for example, biology, you can see how quantum biology is playing out, which allows for evolutionary leaps where we can't find the missing link between a species. It just suddenly evolved to be perfectly adapted to the new environment. And that happens again and again and again. In fact, that's the norm, is these evolutionary quantum jumps are normal. So I believe we're going to start recognizing that this is a quite natural phenomenon that we're all experiencing. And then going back to your question, individuals sometimes can experience really different realities than what the collective is experiencing. And this is very much part of it. It's normal. It's natural.
Oh, that's really neat. I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this question. Now, let's just say, for instance, we'll go back to my experience. I was trying to get into realities where there was another me there. Now, would I be able to, let's just say, for instance, that there was another me in another reality that was also in the in between with me? Could we then trade out our physical bodies and experience our different dimensions, and then after a week or so switch back?
That's probably entirely possible. As long as they're similar enough, then it won't be too shocking. I think there's a reason that most of us don't experience huge changes like that unless we have what they call multiple personality disorder, which I don't think is a disorder. I talked on this also was covered in my presentation, which will be on YouTube pretty soon on the YouTube channel International Mandela Effect Conference, because we're now seeing celebrities coming forth and saying the reason that I'm able to be a star businessman and a star athlete. Here's my secret. I've been treated by psychologists for multiple personality disorder, but I'm going above the disorder and I'm making the most of it. It's called dissociative identity disorder, multiple personality disorder. And what's interesting about these so-called, I don't want to call it a disorder anymore. Now that I've said that, I'm going to switch out of it.
Yeah,
So,
that's really
okay,
neat.
let's
I never
forget the
even.
disorder.
Yeah.
In the past, we've seen people that claimed that they were afflicted by this. Um, I believe we're now at a golden age of quantum jumping where no longer do we need to call this a disorder, but instead, like the athlete who can become a star businessman and be a multimillionaire and excel at whatever he puts his mind to. Yes, absolutely. The answer to your question is yes, we could do that. And by working with this kind of symphony of selves, that's a new book coming out this year, 2020, by the author Jordan Gruber. and he's working in conjunction with a psychologist. So that book is Your Symphony of Selves, and it really brings back to prominence a theory that is actually quite old. It's not brand new at all. That instead of thinking of ourselves as just one fixed personality, that's not true at all. And it's always been the case that we have had a multitude and access to this. So by giving ourselves, like you are, awareness, hey, I could do this, you're opening the keys to this quantum jumping castle, and that we are each sovereign citizens. We are all from this kingdom of quantum jumping, and this it's really our birthright to do this. I believe in doing it always with the idea in mind for the best for all concerned. And the reason I do that is because there can be a price that we pay if we try to be a zero sum game winner. I don't believe in a zero sum game. I think we need to always be cognizant that there are others involved. And just like you noticed, wow, I was a jerk. It's very easy for humans to become jerks and to develop pride and think that you might know, for example, what's best for everyone. That's a very, very dangerous path to go. It's always best to recognize, nope, I pretty much can't know what everyone else wants. I'm going to respect others. And the way I do that, I'm very spiritual, so I would just start each day by saying that I'm living for what's best for all concerned, and I'd like to dedicate my life today to being in service with God, and that sets my pride right aside, right from the start. Because boys, it's amazing how quickly that can cause trouble. I've noticed it, and I think a lot of people have noticed it.
Yeah. Do you think that like our different selves in the different dimensions are of the same soul, or are they of different souls?
That's a really good question. I think they're having different fragmentary experiences. Obviously, like I don't know about you, but if I'm looking at a jerk version of myself, I'd be like, oh my gosh, I don't even want to claim that. I don't know. I had a question for you too, Conflict, because I was. Do you mind if I ask you a question?
No, go ahead.
When you describe this experience, that in between, one thing when I get, because I've been collecting these firsthand reports for decades, what I would ask you is, when did that happen? Like what was going on in the context of your life, if you remember? Maybe your age, generally speaking, but more importantly, what was on your mind? What was in your heart? What was the?
It wasn't that long ago. It was right at the start of our lockdown. It wasn't that long ago at all.
Okay, so
It
it's
it
very
was
recent,
it was
2020.
yeah, probably February or March of this year.
Okay,
You know.
okay. And did anything in particular that you're aware of precipitate that? Was there something that occurred or some?
No, that's exactly it. I've been studying. I did have pneumonia real bad and was admitted to the hospital. I guess it'll be a year ago, probably in September or October. It was a year ago, just in a few months where it didn't. I was actually it almost went septic
Right.
and got really bad, and I don't know if maybe that had something to do with it. Because I kind of had a I guess a spiritual awakening at that
Yes.
point. Trying to do more good, trying to be more right. I guess since then, but I don't know. I think maybe some people are calling this the time of the Great Awakening,
Yes.
and maybe I'm just tuned. I tuned into maybe the energy of the Earth is kind of
Yes.
changing.
And this was another talk given at the conference that Evan Maitreya, Moneybag 73 on YouTube. He gave a talk talking about this time of Great Awakening, and really just that there is something happening on a cosmic scale. I would say that's also what I'm observing. I think some of us were there early on. I'm sure I even knew I had that very strong feeling in the 1990s when I woke up early that's what I was there to do, was to kind of like be there so that when others started noticing like, whoa, things are strange, I'd be there already. And I'd be able to say, yep, I can validate that for you. Yep, that's true. You're having a real experience. And that was a lot of the value I was providing in the 90s and early 2000s. And then like talking with Art Bell, and so forth. So it helps because then the people that are waking up now, if you don't have that if you don't have any basis to establish a new sense of fundamental reality, this can be disorienting, very disturbing even.
Yeah, I've been trying to figure out how I was able to even initiate that to try to do it again. Now that I know how to get back, thanks to the guy at Cornell. But I haven't been able to. I don't know if maybe obviously I was sleeping, but that's more like I was just in a really relaxed state because you don't have to be sleeping to quantum jump, right?
That's right. It's good to be in a relaxed daydream-like state. So kind of like if it's a meditative kind of practice where you can practice when you're falling asleep each night, when you're waking up each morning. Instead of rushing around when you wake up, just stay in that in-between state where on days when you're able to, sometimes you have to get up and do something. But
Yeah.
if you're able to just maintain that kind of dream, like I'm dreaming, but I'm awake in the dream. And that's the goal, is to become lucid, to kind of experience, for example, that you're dreaming, but you're dreaming. And when you can bring that awareness into your waking life, this is what I describe in my book, Reality Shifts, then you can engage with reality in a very different way. It's very much like you're living a waking dream. It is a spiritual practice, I see, because it requires that you uphold your highest level of ethics. Because, just think about it. If whatever you're thinking about is manifesting, then it's a responsibility, actually. This is no longer the time to be childish and petty in any way. In fact, it's very important to be forgiving and to, even if you don't understand why something happened or someone did something, just to start off by forgiving. Just know that they're dealing with divine source directly. It's not your job to do that. Let go of it. And that can be really hard, but it's very important, because the thing is, all of these reality shifts that I've noticed are driven by the subconscious. So I'll just give an example. And this actually did happen. I was offended by a certain musician who was singing a song, and I thought it was derogatory toward women, and I really didn't like it. It was Mustang Sally is the song, and it was the way he was singing it, and I thought, he doesn't like women. And then I didn't like him, and I knew better. I know, don't think anything bad, don't feel anything bad about anyone, but oops. I was very upset with him, and he developed a case of laryngitis. He totally lost his voice for like weeks. And then I realized, oh gosh, I think I had something to do with this. And I know people might be listening and thinking that's coincidence. Yeah, you could say that. But the thing is, I've seen this just so many times that for me personally, I just took it to be, I need to be forgiving about everything and not judge anyone for anything, no matter what. Because what happens when we develop this gift of quantum jumping is I'll start experiencing these realities. And the best realities that I've found are the ones that are best for everyone concerned. It's really a how good can it get for all of us reality. And that means not knowing, like, I can't speak for you. You have to be able to get the reality that feels right for you. I have to trust the universe and all of the other humans to do their best without judging, getting upset with them as they mess it up. I've messed it up. This is the challenging part of it, really.
Yeah. Are some people more able to do this than others?
Yes, I think. Well, for one
And
thing,
and,
like
and
you said,
why?
we're in
Why
a
why would
time
that
of
be?
what?
And why would that be? Why would it be different for?
Okay, some people, like if you look at the Dalai Lama, and that's a historical tradition of reincarnation. So the new Dalai Lama is selected because they can find the child that remembers the objects and remembers the familiar other Buddhists and so forth. So that idea of reincarnation, that's a good idea. So that's part of this process of why some are really good at it. They've basically been working on it for lifetimes. So it's like choosing through every possible experience of living. Each time you live, you're choosing again. I would like to live in the most enlightened way. So just making that choice for yourself. And as you consistently do that, you actually do gain skill sets that do stay with you. It's pretty much, I think, I can't remember where I heard it, but they say whatever you forget is what you get to bring with you. So it's like whatever you remember, no matter what, like even when you're pushed to the limit and you have a tendency to have your buttons pushed and fall back to old patterns. Whatever you fall back to, that's what you bring with you to the next life. So you want your fallback to be your best game. You want to be your most forgiving, your most enlightened, your best. And so those people do have an advantage. The ones that have been doing that, and then they come in. And I've been doing that to some degree. I'm not like the Dalai Lama, but I think in my case, I'm definitely making that choice in that direction. Like I definitely want to be doing that. I think there are a lot of us right now on the planet doing this, and different people are doing different levels of it. So that's one way. Other people that are good at this are people who are raised in a shamanic tradition. They grew up being they were chosen to be the shaman for their village, and then they got the training and the tutelage and so forth. They're going to be good at this. Other ones who are good at this are advanced martial artists who are doing internal ki work, working with the yin and the yang or and yang energy, and learning to bring that into their body and become one with mind, body, spirit awareness. I do martial arts. I'm aware that there's a connection there, so I love it. So there's a definite advantage if you do Tai Chi, yoga. Those people will have an advantage. Other people that have a definite advantage in this would be lucid dreamers, people that have been exploring how to wake up inside their dreams. There's more groups of people that have an advantage, and that would include people that do lots of meditation, like hours every day. They definitely have an advantage. Also, people that have near-death experiences have an advantage. Also, UFO experiencers. Pretty much any experiencer of EHE, exceptional human experience, will definitely have an advantage. You have an advantage because of that exceptional human experience you had earlier this year.
Yeah, I'll tell you, it's one of those, you're waking up, but you're waking up and you just know, like, oh, that was not a dream. There's no way that I dreamt that, and I actually doing the research on it and seeing, oh well, you were quantum jumping, and then researching quantum jumping and reading exactly what it was like, oh my god, that's exactly what I was doing. It's exactly what I was doing.
And that verifies that it wasn't just a dream, because
Yeah, because I
you're
actually
learning
spoke to
something that there's,
somebody else.
yeah. Yeah, no one told you that. It didn't come in. It's not like you were watching YouTube videos about it. No friends were talking about it. It wasn't on TV.
Yeah, well, that's you always have the skeptic. It's,
I
oh,
know.
you must have heard it at some point, and it was buried in your subconscious, and blah 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 blah. And I'm thinking, no, like, no, I'm pretty good at remembering things. I think I would have remembered hearing about something like that. Like,
Right. Yeah, this subject came up last night on the Rip and Rabbit Hole radio show. It was the Mandela Monthly, and Moneybag 73 that I've spoken of. He was on the show with a scientist, Dr. Elizabeth, and I can't remember her last name, but she's the one that gets quoted all the time anytime Mandela Effect comes up, and they say, well, it's just confabulation. And so in this particular program, it was a very interesting program. I called into the show because I had just found these researchers that I mentioned earlier, Mary Rose Barrington and Tony Jinks, the professor of psychology in Australia. So that was the reason I phoned in. But I got on the show after their guest had left. That was Dr. Elizabeth. I'm so sorry, I can't remember her name. Oh, Loftus. That's it. Loftus. So if you see in like any newspaper or magazine article right now where they try to do a balanced job of describing the Mandela effect, 9 times out of 10, it seems lately, they're mentioning Dr. Elizabeth Loftus has said that we can see that confirmation bias, there's a psychological factor involved where people will think that they have seen a Mandela effect, but actually they were influenced by something that they've previously seen or heard. So it was really good to have her on the show with Mandela affected people. That was Evan from the Moneybag 73 YouTube channel, speaking with a magician in Las Vegas. That's AJ, and he is the Rippin' Rabbit. He runs that radio show. It's quite good. Mm-hmm. So when I loved that, because when you've got a professional magician, which AJ is, talking with a psychology expert, Dr. Loftus, and then she's basically they didn't put her on the spot. They were very respectful. A lot of the people in the YouTube chat were suggesting, ask her this, ask her that, see if she's Mandela affected. But they didn't push it. They just gently came around and eventually mentioned that some people remember, for example, in the movie The Wizard of Oz, that when the witch has those flying monkeys, there's something that she says in the movie. And this is the coolest. I'm getting goosebumps right now. The coolest part of that show last night was where Dr. Loftus was actually saying, she agreed, it's fly, my pretties, fly. And Evan Moneybag said, that's right. That's what a lot of us remember. And now she never says that. Never. And Dr. Loftus is like, what? Because this is a perfect example of a Mandela effect. It's like, okay, many of us do remember a different reality. And why would that be? Moneybags has been tracking
these... So she doesn't say that in the movie?
No.
Well, in no place. No, I remember that too.
Right. See? Yeah, me too. And they got her with another one. Okay, here's another good one. You remember the old show where they would say, good night, Grace, good night, Gracie, at the end? It was the guy that smoked the cigar, George Burns and Gracie. It's a very old TV show.
Yeah, well, anyway, I'm not familiar with
it's before my time. But the point is, he would say at the end of every show, good night, Gracie. And then there was something she always said. And again, Dr. Loftus said, because they were, AJ and Evan were asking Dr. Loftus, what do you think she said? And she said, good night, Gracie. It was kind of funny. She'd say, good night, Gracie, because he would say good night, Gracie. That's what George would say to Gracie.
Yeah. And
the joke was, every single time, a lot of us remember that Gracie would always hilariously say, good night, Gracie, even though, what he was saying is say good night, Gracie. You get the point.
Yeah.
Okay, anyway, so that's what Dr. Loftus said. She said, good night, Gracie. And that is never the case. So everybody that remembers that show remembers it that way. And they got her on 2 of those. So you can actually hear that program, the Rippin' Rabbit Hole show, last night. So that would be the, July 6th.
See, that's another example of how the entire, how most of the entire planet has gone into a quantum jump.
Right. And we would expect that when we look at, see, what I love to do is I love to look at the philosophy of it. Like, is it possible? I'm an optimist, right? I like to ask, how good can it get? I believe nature works that way. And I love philosophers that show us how that works. Like I love Leibniz, one of the inventors of calculus. I love his take on what consciousness is, because he believes that we have that first perception, which is like zero, first, like a zero-dimensional awareness, and then you step back and you have a reflective cognitive reflection on that first level perception. That is consciousness. So that's calculus too. So you've got Leibniz showing how consciousness has this multi-leveled reflective quality to it. I think he's exactly right. But we've got a modern day philosopher who takes that and takes the ball and runs with it. And that's our beautiful philosopher who wrote the book Axiogenesis. His name is Nicholas Rescher. He's out of Pennsylvania, an octogenarian. Oh, he's beautiful. But here's why. So when you think it's like everyone's changing. Yes, we are. So you'll see evidence as we do that the human body is changing to be, we're actually witnessing physiological changes in real time with our organs and with our bone structure that's making us better than we've ever been. It's happening instantly with no trace of any change. It's like it's always been that way. Like our heart is protected in our under the ribs cage in the center of the chest.
There's got
Yeah.
to be something causing it. Maybe because we all know how our reality is based on frequency and vibration. Maybe if there's a bad earthquake or something, the vibration of the earthquake puts the whole earth into a different jump. It's got to be something causing it.
Well, if you look at this is where it gets interesting, because I go back to noticing that all these shifts we're observing look like quantum phenomena. They all do. To me, that's like, well, every single thing we're seeing is normal on the so-called quantum realm. What if the realm isn't a realm? What if the theory of everything physicists are right, and we actually are witnessing quantum phenomena on the celestial scale? So that we remember, for example, we used to be in the Sagittarius arm of the Milky Way, but now suddenly apparently we've always been in the Orion section. That's very different for a lot of us, myself included. So if something like that can happen, if our kidneys, like you might remember where your kidneys are. I remember they used to be like my lower back. Like you put your hands when you climb up a hill and you put your hands there to get some rest. Mm-hmm. But now they're safe. That there used to be a kidney punch, and if you kicked or hit someone in their lower back, they might start bleeding in their urine, and that meant they might die very soon. No longer is that a risk, because the kidneys on every single one of us, like 8 billion humans on the planet, all of our kidneys have moved up under our rib cage, all of them. So we're experiencing huge shifts in our bodies, which look like they're for our welfare. It looks like it's like these jumps in evolution that we see, like missing links in the evolutionary system. It looks like we're doing this right now, and we're able to see it if we pay attention and compare notes with what we remember.
And nobody notices this. That'd be like all of us waking up tomorrow and we only have 4 fingers and 4 toes, and we just always remember having 4 fingers and 4 toes.
Well, there are some of us that are remembering these other histories, and these are the Mandela Effect affected. But many of us who are researching this, myself included, agree that probably everyone's experiencing it. It's just not everyone's noticing it, and that's okay. So not everyone does notice it. And that's where some of these phrases like they took the download, or, it's kind of, because you can actually see it happen. You can ask someone, what do you remember? Like, what's a kidney punch? They'll tell you. I ask martial artists this, and they show me, like, okay, where are your kidneys? They put their hands kind of in that lower back area. And then I can just ask them, or I tell them, but that's not where they are right now. You can look it up. That's still like an illegal move. Don't do that kidney punch, but it doesn't do anything anymore because the kidneys aren't there. They've moved to safety up a little bit higher, under the ribs.
So what do terms like reality, residue, and take the download mean?
Yeah, we're talking about the take the download. It ties in with what we were discussing a minute ago about the collective, like there might be a collective consciousness, awareness of what's happening overall, and then there is always perhaps a bit of a difference with our individual experiences. So, and that's true even amongst the Mandela Effect affected, that we might not, like some of these don't ring bells for me. Sex and the City was not a show that I watched, so some people say it's Sex and the Cities in the City. I really have no idea. It was not on my radar, so no idea at all. Some of them I'm sort of only distantly aware of, but okay. So take the download would mean, like, let's take a look at, for example, what's a good one? I think I'm trying to think of one that's good for everybody. I think everyone knows Star Wars, so we'll go with one that resonates for me. You like Star Wars?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's in the movie, the second movie, which was, I guess, episode number, what would it be, 5? It would be
Empire Strikes Back.
Exactly. And that's the one where there's that pivotal moment where Luke Skywalker is dangling, sort of hanging by a thread, and above him is Darth Vader. And there's that really dramatic moment, and the deep booming tones of the actor who plays Darth Vader. It's quite memorable for me because I saw this movie in the theater when it first came out. And that's James Earl Jones. You know his voice. It's just like
Uh-huh.
very deep. I remember that he said, Luke, I am your father. But now, it for to take the download would be if for me to ask someone what fill in the blank. What's the dialogue in this pivotal movie scene? Not let them hear it, but just ask them to say what they think it is. And maybe they say, Luke, I'm your father. And then I play what it currently is, which is James Earl Jones's voice saying, No, I am your father. And take the download would be that moment where the person hears that, and then it's kind of like something weird happens. Like they were agreeing with you. It was Luke, I am your father. But now they've heard that, and they're like, yeah, it's always been no, I'm your father. And they won't even agree or go back to that first position because they have taking the download is very analogous to being consumed by or being part of that flock of consciousness. It's like a flock of birds flying together that believe the existing historical truth, which is it's always been, no, I'm your father.
Well, that's an
So it's
interesting way that
yeah,
you put it. Like take the download. Like there's a controller, in our matrix universe, that's really all a simulation that's pretty much updating the system. You know,
right.
you know where I'm going there. Like how some people think that this is all a simulation and we're all a computer program, and you know
Right.
maybe that has something to do with it. You know.
It might, but it's just a partial. In my opinion, the simulation theory is a good start, but it doesn't go to rock bottom because it sort of parks us at a point of familiarity where we don't as soon as we label something or name it, we think we understand it. Like, oh, it's a computer, it's a simulation. But most of us don't know how to build a computer or write the machine language or the operating system or let alone the code to create that simulation. So for us, it's just sort of like, oh, we've labeled it, now we can ignore it, and we don't have to think. The thinking that would be required is, okay, if it is a simulation, what is it simulating? And who is doing the simulation? And so because it hasn't answered those questions, we just sort of parked it in a familiar parking spot. Like, oh, we have computers. We don't know how to write machine language or build our own computer chips. Of course not. We just know how to use them. So we can pretend that that's what's going on because it's the black box, and therefore we don't have to look inside of it. We're familiar with not looking. Don't ask any more questions when you're running a simulation, right? Like, no one's going to demand that you suddenly do a Martha Stewart moment and build your computer from scratch. Like, okay, I'll give you the all of the materials you need. Here's your silicon. Here's your soldering iron. Build your computer. Write the machine language, the operating system, and all the code. There, go. It's like, no, we don't expect that. So that's why I say simulation theory is lazy in a way, because it doesn't really address the actual issue.
And what about reality residue?
Reality residue is fascinating. It gives us it's a form of validation, if you will, or evidence based on usually artworks of some form. But the art could actually be just someone typing in a price sticker or label, like they might type in Berenstein Bears and they spell it the way they remember it. So they work at Walmart or whatever. They actually type in Berenstein, EIN, and Bears, and then they price it. And so, but then someone at the store, they're holding in their hands the actual Berenstain books, AIN, with a price label that says EIN. And so that's reality residue, where some person, based on their own memory, typed something into a system that shows they remember it the way a lot of us do. It could also be in the form of a painting or a scale model, like the JFK vehicle that he was in when he was assassinated.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the whole, because there's controversy about the Zapruder film and how many people were in the car. So you might see a historical reenactment or a historical, like a scale model of the vehicle that shows a lot fewer people in the vehicle, which is what a lot of people remember. Now it's like there were 6 people in the car or something. And if that's before people's time, that's okay. But it's not about any one
Well, there were four. There
particular
were four
thing.
people in the
Yeah.
car, wasn't there?
There were how many?
4?
Yeah, that's what a lot of people remember. But now it's like I think there's more than that. It's very odd.
Oh, I'll
That's
have
one
to
that
definitely
I
go back
wasn't
and look
tracking
again.
that quite so closely. So for me, it's sort of a blurry peripheral thing. It's like that does seem a bit weird, but for some people, that's the one. It's a lot of people, they feel like, okay, that's it. I can't go with the official story because I remember something very different.
Huh. Now, you just had a Mandela Effect conference. What is
Yes.
that? Do you do them often?
Yeah, well, we just started our nonprofit organization. We just got that designation this year. We would love to pursue research in this area because it's been neglected or ignored by most of science. So it's our goal to provide education and eventually, hopefully, funding as well for researchers to actually be able to delve into this topic, which we consider to be world changing and also a very positive phenomenon. We tend to see it as part of human evolution, that we're definitely in this great awakening that we were talking about. And obviously, people need resources. So we're hoping to do these events at least annually. We do have a board of directors, and we've started talking about how we can meet people's needs. Our first event was meant to, originally, we'd planned to do an in person conference in Connecticut. And that did not happen because the pandemic that's happening right now required that we could not all gather in one place. So, in a very short time frame, we switched over from what would have been a 3-day in-person conference. We stretched it out to 6 live days over the course of a week, starting on a Saturday and going through the next Friday in June. And all of those presentations from 14 presenters, and Regina Meredith was our keynote speaker, and she's the one who was largely recognized as starting Gaia TV. She was remarkable, and a lot of our speakers were extraordinary. On the board of directors with me is the quantum businessman, Christopher Anatra, and then Jerry Dark Wolf Hicks, who has a program on Wednesday nights on the Rip and Rabbit Hole radio show. Also is Shane Robinson of Unbiased and on the Fence on YouTube. And then we've got our very special resource, our Canadian artist, Kimberly Lynn Hansen, and she has created, I believe, the first exhibit of Mandela Effect art that is extraordinary. And she brought it to the event that we had in 2019 before we were officially a nonprofit organization. So that would be Ketchum, Idaho, November of 2019. And that's those videos showing her art and talking about that with some real-time delayed choice reality shifts happening. Some of the time stuff occurred in her talk, and it's really worth seeing. And that's all on the International Mandela Effect Conference YouTube channel.
Yeah, the next time you have one and it's a in-person event, definitely let us know here at Conflict Radio. We will be there.
Awesome. I would love to have you
Because
there.
this is a fascinating topic for me, as you can imagine, simply because of my experience, and I don't want to miss anything like that. Did any Mandela effects occur during that?
Yes, absolutely. We had a couple of real doozies occurred. So I don't even
Can
know
you
where to
share?
start.
Can you share them?
Yeah, well, I hinted at something that happened in the talk that Kimberly Lynn Hansen gave. Actually, several happened. One of them just going to leave to her talk because I don't want to spoil it. So I'm going to leave that one. It's a 2-part thing, and please watch them, and
And
you'll
they can
see what I
find
mean.
that. They can find that where again? Just.
Okay, the channel, you want to subscribe to it, everybody. It's called International Mandela Effect Conference. And it's a long name, but it's on YouTube. And once you're subscribed, then you can browse through the videos and go back to, it would be Kimberly Lynn Hansen's 2-part presentation. Really excellent. So there's definitely something going on in there that's extraordinary. Okay, but in addition to that, we had several other things. So I'll start with, they're mind-blowing. Okay, one of them, which I think is well worth watching. This occurred, and you can see it in the video, where the quantum businessman, Christopher Anatra, is interviewing Jerry Darkwolf Hicks, who was the host of our first conference and is the father of IMEC, or International Mandela Effect Conference. So Chris is talking to Jerry, and as they're talking, Jerry brings up something about how, I forget the exact context. It was something about how the Mandela effect might be challenging some of the authority regime on the planet. And just as, and Chris was saying, should we always ask questions? Should we always stand up for what we believe in? And Jerry said something like, yes, we should always do that. And then you can hear this sort of crash off camera. As he's talking, one of the pieces of art fell off the wall. And I texted, I was in the room when this happened, and I sent a text immediately to Kimberly Lynn Hansen, the Canadian artist that created this, a whole series of artworks based on various Mandela effects. And she, without knowing which piece fell, she asked me, I told her what had happened. I said, whoa, something just fell, one of your pieces of art fell off the wall. And she said, was it Darth Vader? Ha ha. And I said, yes. She knew. Okay. So it's like she said, my art speaks, it talks, it communicates. Mm-hmm. And so right when that was funny, but I'm just starting with the sort of average run of the mill Mandela effects. They get trippier. So that would be what I'd call, like, that's cool. You could call it synchronicity. You could say that's nothing. Okay, fine. Let's go one bigger. And I don't want to take up too much of the time with just what happened at the conference. This was a small conference, by the way. It was our first gathering with those of us who are now IMEC before we were IMEC. And I think we had maybe 20, 30 people in the room. So it was not very big. Nevertheless, one of the participants had been taking a nap in her room when another participant with her son at the same time remembers clearly having had a very detailed conversation with the woman who was napping in her room out in front of the hotel on the steps, just talking for maybe 30 to 40 minutes before one of them had to go, do whatever they had to do. So this was, and not only did she and her son remember the conversation, they remember what was said. Okay, so they were talking about this after, and this had all come up after I'd given my talk on how sometimes I bilocate. And I'd given examples of my bilocations where I'm daydreaming in that daydream state of mind. So I think I'm trapped inside at a book event, looking out on a beautiful day, wishing I was outside, thinking I'm walking down the street, a very certain street, where someone observes me walking down that street and emails me later that day, hey, Cynthia, I thought you had a book event today. What were you doing walking down Solano Avenue? And I said, whoa, really? So I talked about that. Okay, now here we are at the conference, and it's happening again. It's happening to two of the participants in the conference. I came across them that evening, and as they were very confused, the one who claimed, that's impossible. You could not have been talking to me because I was taking a nap in my room. I never came out of my room. I had so much to process. I just went straight to my room and I took a nap. That's what I was doing. And so I asked that woman, were you possibly daydreaming at all? She said, yes, I didn't exactly sleep. I just sort of, I guess you could call it that. I was daydreaming. And I said, where were you? Do you remember where you were daydreaming? And she's just thinking about that. But the funny thing is, what the woman and her son remember that the other woman had said, it was very detailed. I'm not going to go into all the details, but they described it to her and she was mind blown. She said, that's all true. My husband doesn't believe in the Mandela effect. He doesn't like it. He's not happy that I'm studying it, and some other, I'm not going to go into the more detailed stuff. It was personal. But the point is, there's no way that woman and her son could possibly have learned all this, let alone seen her, but they did. So there was a bilocation that occurred at the Mandela Effect conference.
Oh, that's really, really interesting.
Yeah, I love these live events. So, I mean, the online ones are cool too, but
yeah, and the one that you just did was online, right?
That's right. It was set up to be free online. We are a nonprofit, so right now we're being funded by our own resources. Jerry Hicks put in a lot of his own time, effort, money, blood, and everything. He really is the father of IMEC. Then our quantum businessman, of course, is a CEO of a company and a software company. So he has generously been able to provide us with a lot of resources to make this online and make it free. Thank goodness. I don't think it would have happened this way otherwise. And I've put a lot of my own money, time, and effort in as well. And so has Shane Robinson of Unbiased and on the Fence, and as well as Kimberly Lynn Hansen. So those of us who are on the board of directors in whatever capacity have definitely contributed to making it free and available. We just felt with what was going on in the world, it's so important for the information to be available, and it didn't make any sense to charge for it. Plus, it was our first time even doing this online, so
Yeah,
for all those reasons, yeah.
these are definitely very crazy and interesting times that we're living in. How can you see the Mandela effect providing us with something useful in these coronavirus times?
Well, to me, the Mandela effect represents the best of what humanity has to offer in collaboration with nature, with each other, with the world. I think that what I see for potential with humanity right now is very much that we can step into being caretakers of this earth with each other, caretakers for ourselves, each other, the planet, to learn to be much more creatively active. We already are creative with our hands, we're creative with our hearts, with our bodies. What we're learning now is to be creative at another level of connectivity, so that we're becoming creative with our thoughts having the power to be creative in themselves. And that's something that maybe we should never have been trusted with previously. Some people might say we're still not trustworthy, but for those of us who believe that we're divinely guided and we get chances for these do-overs, like you experienced. I mean, maybe that wasn't a do-over, but you definitely got that chance to recognize what it's like to be in that in-between state. I think that's the essence of the quantum jump, to know that you can go there no matter what it looks like is happening. The message that I would say is there's always hope. No matter how bad it might look, you can go to that in-between place, that daydream state, and just be pure consciousness, because that's what the father of quantum physics said we are. He said, that was Max Planck. He said that nothing gets behind consciousness. Fundamentally, everything is conscious and consciousness, and you can't get behind it. That means we're not going to find consciousness in neurons in the brain. That's a fool's errand. We already know that we've got neurons in our heart, we've got a brain in our stomachs, in our gut. So what are we wasting our time, trying to find some material explanation, when obviously, as you experienced, and as so many of us are experiencing, we have a very sort of this eternal, infinite quality to ourselves. It is a spiritual awakening. We can recognize that we can access this in-between state of all possibility and start learning to make good choices. We might feel like we're stuck in there for years. That sounds like a terrible thing to go
No,
through,
that's
but
exactly it. Yeah, but you're
yeah,
not. You're not. That's just
you're not.
yeah.
Yeah,
When one of the realities that I was actually in, I knew it wasn't the right reality because one of my a male family member that has passed in this reality was alive in that one. So I knew I was in the wrong reality because this person was alive in that reality. And if I had understood exactly what was going on, if I was intentionally doing that, I would have hung out there a little bit longer and maybe had a conversation or something with this person. And I didn't. Like, as soon as I saw him, I was like, oh, this is the wrong one. And I was poof, gone. Because I was so panicked because I couldn't find my way back to this one. So
yeah, it's kind of like going down the hallway and opening all the doors. Like, oops, wrong room. Oops. Yeah,
that's exactly what it was, and it's a dark hallway. That in between is kind of dark. It's a dark in between.
right,
There's it's kind of like you're not seeing anything.
right.
You know.
Yet all the possibilities are immediately available.
So what kind of scientific validation exists for any of this?
Ah, good thing you asked that. I love it. Well, that's the other thing I've been doing besides providing solace and just this ability to let people know you're not going crazy in these last 20 years. The other thing I do is I look to quantum physics in particular, but also related fields, to see um, what are we finding in the laboratory settings that can provide some basis to better understand this, or even validate it to begin with. And a
Yeah,
big
I mean, they're
breakthrough
obviously
came.
studying it at Cornell.
Excellent. Yeah, I need now. I love that you brought that up because it was not on my radar, but now it's like that is so cool. So definitely check that out. One of the big news stories that I was aware of from 2019 came to us courtesy of laboratories in physics at the University of Vienna, Austria, in collaboration with quantum physicists at Edinburgh, Scotland. And what they were doing is taking the very classic, in fact, it's considered the most classic science experiment ever created, which is the double slit experiment. And what they did is they wanted to find out if they had two trusted detection observational systems set up at the same place in the same time, would they actually witness two different possible answers to what's happening there? The reason they were doing this had to do with very much that I talked about levels of consciousness earlier. Remember when I mentioned the zero dimension, and that's like and then one dimension, that's like a touch, and then two dimensions is a level above it. Each time you go up, then you're doing a reflective perception of the previous level of awareness, and that's how consciousness, according to Leibniz, the philosopher, grows. So within the physics world, the famous physicist Erwin Schrödinger devised an experiment that he originally intended to show how ludicrous quantum physics really is. He imagined that you could put a cat into an imaginary box, imaginary cat, imaginary box with imaginary poison. So you're not going to kill no real cats will be injured in this experiment. It's a thought experiment. And the trigger mechanism would be quantum. It would be based on radioactive isotope decay, which decays at a totally random rate. So the end result is, until you open the box, nobody knows if the cat is alive or dead. So that's the Schrödinger cat experiment. What happened next is another physicist named Wigner said, well, hang on there, Schrödinger. That's a bizarre experiment, and it does look weird that you can have a cat that's both alive and dead in the box, because we know quantum physics says you can have a superposition of states, which is like your in-between conflict when you're in that in-between.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but then Wigner is saying, okay, we're watching this whole thing. What happens when you entangle an observer who's watching the person who's watching the cat? So that is the construct, that who's watching who, kind of a stair-stepping levels of consciousness route thing. And they brought that into the double slit experiment. I'm sorry if I'm going too fast. Hopefully people know the double slit experiment. Yeah. But even if you don't, it doesn't matter. Just the outcome is interesting. You can look at this up, and I did blog about it, so people can check that out. And you can find all my information on my website, realityshifters.com. So you'll probably mention that in the link. But anyway, so the point about this article in 2019 is, thanks to the whole idea of multiple observers, they set up, the scientists at Edinburgh, Scotland, and Vienna, Austria, collaborated to create this apparatus which had two observers at the same place, same time. And here's the drum roll and the bizarre result. The bizarre result is they were able to reliably, accurately, verifiably observe two completely different realities at the same place and same time. That should have been 2019's cover story, in my opinion, that there is no such thing as objective reality.
So where do you think all this goes? Like in the future, what?
Where it's going is humanity gradually, step by step, learning to work together collaboratively to make the free will choice to wish the best for all concerned, to learn that when you think something, it can and often does have a very real physical effect. We're basically sliding into the driver's seat of a car that we don't know what we're doing with. Some of us feel like, what the heck? It's like putting dogs in the driver's seat. I love those videos. Well, that's what it looks like humans are doing right now. We're learning to operate consciousness at a level that most of us are a little ill-prepared to deal with. So, fortunately, you were noticing this is the wrong reality for me. But we're learning to basically do these quantum jumps, to find out that you've got a diagnosis from your doctor, that you've got 2 months to live, but you've got a lot of people praying for you, and people feel like, no. And next thing you know, you're fine. And nobody knows what happened to that cancer. That's what happened to my grandmother. She had inoperable liver cancer in her 90s, and it completely vanished because she did have hundreds of people praying for her. And I was one of the people that was like, no. And next thing we know, there's no trace of cancer anywhere in her body. So the blood tests, they had tissue samples, blood tests, everything, and scans, you name it. And suddenly none of those showed that she had liver cancer anymore.
Well,
So that's
like
where we're going.
the power of manifestation.
Yes.
Well, I guess I have a few I guess not personal questions, but have you ever been in the in between?
Not for years, as you describe, but I would say I think what you mean by the in between is that when you're still in a body, you're still alive. Because I actually remember what it's like when I'm dead, which is blissful, and that feels different. But this state, when you are in a body and you know you are, but you're just sort of like all over the place, not quite the way you describe it. And when I go through the in between, it's like I'm striding through more purposefully. It's not. Sometimes I'll just sort of hang out there, like let's take a look at what's available. So sometimes I'll choose my day that way, kind of like look at all, like flipping through pages in a book. Sometimes, but I don't usually. It's certainly I've never had that experience that you described where it went on for years. At least not in this lifetime.
Yeah.
Probably I have had that experience in a lifetime, because once you go through that, you probably don't need to go through it again. It's one of those things like, good heavens. I bet you'll never do that again.
It's very depressing. So what do you think would have happened to my physical body had I not been able to find my way back?
Oh, a number of things might have happened. And you might have glimpsed versions of it. It would depend on different people's experiences. So the people that felt like they need you back, they would experience you back. Again, the results from the 2019 physics experiment. There's no such thing as objective reality. So just the same reason that some people experience some Mandela effects but not others, and they know, and sometimes they'll experience them at different times. Our reality is very, very fluid. It's not as solid as it looks at all. So some people might have noticed, like, wow, conflict went into a coma. What happened? Is he coming back? So it's like that uncertainty. Yeah. Other people would just feel like you're there, but you're spaced out, like you're not really all there.
Yeah.
And some people with the Mandela Effect community say that we've got people who are sleepwalking or NPCs, like non-player characters.
Yeah. Huh. Well, we really appreciate having you come on our show. It's very interesting. We'd love to get you back on. Perhaps, if you got a new book coming out soon. What are you working on currently?
Well, I'm definitely working still with this new IMEC nonprofit organization that we've just created a few months ago. So we're looking into more events, perhaps even in addition to the annual. There are discussions going on about that. But then, of course, I'm still putting out my monthly Reality Shifters newsletter, what I've published every month for more than 20 years. So people can subscribe to that for free. And that's where I share information such as this news that we've got two new to me researchers looking into these JOT and DOP phenomena, which really is the Mandela Effect, going all the way back to the 1950s. With validation that people experiencing this are definitely not crazy. And that comes from a psychologist. So I'll share news like that in my monthly newsletter, as well as what happened at the conference where we had 14 speakers. And I've also got a podcast, Living the Quantum Dream, that's on hiatus at the moment, but it'll probably come back. And I'm working on a new book. So in my world, I'm always doing something.
And what's your website? Where can everybody find you again?
Yes,
and
that is Reality Shifters.
Well, so.
Yeah, right. Okay, my website is www.realityshifters.com. The idea being that we're all Mandela affected. We're all experiencing these experiences. We may not be aware of all being in that in-between, but my goodness, I know we are. I know we're going through it. What's different is some of us are more conscious of it, therefore more called, like you are. And thank you for putting this show together. and taking what was just a bizarre experience and truly making the most of it.
I'm not done. I'm not done. I plan on doing a lot more homework and research into that because that's definitely interesting. And your YouTube channel,
Yes.
you want to tell
Yeah, that's it.
everybody what your YouTube channel is?
Absolutely. That's Cynthia. It's my name, Cynthia Sue Larson, and that's on YouTube. And of course, I do my best to put out about one video a month usually. I might be able to post. We did a Mandela montage, which was so cute. Little 10-second video clips of a whole bunch of YouTubers in the Mandela Effect community. It's extremely uplifting, and we're just making sure that we're clear on using the music in the background. So as soon as we get clearance so that we won't have any copyright violations, then everyone involved can share that video. In fact, I think we probably recommend everybody can share it. So that's the goal, and that should be coming out pretty soon too, both on my YouTube and also the IMEC. And I'm associated with that conference, which you can go to their website too, imec.world. And that's all of us who are working together to bring educational information about this phenomena into the world at large, and also scientific community as well.
Again? I'm sorry, what was that website again?
IMEC, that's International Mandela Effect Conference.world. And that would give you, as soon as we get each of the individual presentations, they'll be available there. You can see our mission, our goals, and future events that we'll be presenting will all be mentioned there.
All right, awesome. As normal, everybody listening, I'll put the links down in the description. Definitely check it out. And thanks very much, Cynthia, for coming on.
Thank you, Conflict. It's really been a great pleasure.
And we'll be right back right after this. Welcome back. That was Cynthia Sue Larson. You know, that was a really interesting conversation. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. I definitely had a lot of questions about quantum jumping. I don't really know if what I was experiencing was a dream or if it was real. I don't have any idea. It's definitely something that, as my wife said, could be in my subconscious that I heard before. I mean, I don't know. I really don't. I think that it's good to learn about it. I think it's good to think about the possibilities of what could be and what our reality might be. I definitely feel as if I was quantum jumping that night. I really do. But I might not have been. I could have been dreaming. I'll admit it. I don't know. But, as the world turns and we learn things and we grow as an intelligent species, we're going to learn new things about ourselves that we don't know. And I think that's what makes shows like this so great, is that we're able to talk about and learn about things that we otherwise would never learn about or talk about. And I hope you guys enjoyed that as much as I did. As always, this is Conflict Radio. Like and subscribe. Leave a comment. Say hi. If you have anything you wish to say, shoot me an email at info@conflictradio.net. I'll respond. I respond to everybody that shoots me an email. I'll respond to you. Give me a shout out. Also, you can find us on Spreaker and Apple iTunes and other great podcast platforms. And until next time, we'll be here. Be safe.